Emma Thorley and Sadie Hartley had never met face to face, but their lives were on a deadly collision course, one driven by obsession, jealousy, and a plan so calculated it shocked even the most seasoned detectives. When Sadie opened her front door that cold January night, she had no idea she was about to come face to face with evil. Sadie Hartley lived a life that seemed untouched by darkness. At 49, she had built a world that many would envy. She was successful in her career as a medical communications consultant, known for her professionalism, kindness, and attention to detail. She had recently moved into a beautiful, spacious home nestled near the edge of the Lake District in Lancashire, surrounded by quiet lanes and open views. Her garden was always neatly trimmed, her car parked carefully in the driveway. Everything about her life suggested order, peace, and comfort. Sadie had raised 2 children from a previous marriage, both of whom were now grown and leading lives of their own. After her divorce, she spent years on her own, focusing on work and rebuilding her life. She had just begun a new relationship with a man named Mark Penrose, a semi-retired osteopath with a calm demeanor and a love for hiking. They had met through mutual friends and quickly developed a close bond. For Sadie, it felt like a fresh chapter, one filled with companionship and the promise of long walks, quiet weekends, and perhaps even growing old together. She was active in her community and known for supporting local charities. Her friends described her as gentle, thoughtful, and highly organized. Her life was filled with routines she enjoyed: morning coffee by the window, evening phone calls to her daughter, and detailed plans for future holidays with Mark. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't secretive. She didn't take risks. That made what happened to her all the more baffling. In the days leading up to her death, there were no signs of trouble. She had gone about her business as usual, shopping for groceries, attending a work meeting over Zoom, even texting friends about an upcoming trip. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But on a cold January morning, something changed. Sadie failed to respond to emails about an important work presentation. Her phone went straight to voicemail. For a woman known for her punctuality and reliability, this was highly unusual. By Sunday, her silence was causing real concern. A colleague decided to check on her personally. He arrived at her home and noticed her car still in the drive, but no answer at the door. The blinds were still drawn. There was a sense of stillness that didn't feel right. He called the police. When officers arrived and entered the home, they discovered a scene that didn't match the peaceful image Sadie had cultivated. Inside, it was too quiet. Nothing was obviously disturbed, no broken windows, no signs of forced entry. But as they moved further into the house, they found her, at the foot of the stairs, lifeless, brutally attacked. The violence of the crime stood in stark contrast to everything else in the house. It was personal, angry, unforgiving. News of her death spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the small community. How could someone like Sadie, so careful, so loved, end up the victim of such a savage killing? In a world she thought was safe, someone had been watching, waiting, and ready to destroy it all. The police officers who entered Sadie Hartley's home that cold January afternoon knew something was wrong the moment they stepped inside. The atmosphere was heavy, unnaturally still. Nothing in the entryway appeared disturbed. Her keys were on the hook, her coat hanging neatly by the door. To the casual eye, it looked like any ordinary home. But as the officers moved further inside, the reality became chillingly clear. Sadie's body was found at the bottom of the stairs, sprawled in a position that immediately ruled out a simple fall. Her injuries were horrific, over 40 stab wounds, each one frenzied, brutal, and deliberate. There were deep gashes to her neck, chest, and arms, suggesting she had tried to fight back. Blood had pooled around her, but curiously, much of the surrounding area was clean. Whoever had done this had taken the time to wipe things down. It was as if the killer had not just murdered Sadie, but had stayed behind to erase their presence. Forensic investigators combed through the home, searching for any clues that could point to the identity of the killer. But they were met with a frustrating scene. There were no fingerprints out of place, no foreign hairs or fibers, no sign of forced entry. The doors were locked, the windows secure. There were no signs of struggle elsewhere in the house. It was as if the killer had appeared out of nowhere and vanished without a trace. Sadie's phone was found tucked away in her handbag, untouched. Her purse was still full. Jewelry sat undisturbed on her dresser. Burglary was quickly ruled out as a motive. There was no apparent reason for the violence. Her home wasn't the scene of a chaotic break-in, it was the scene of a targeted, cold-blooded attack. Someone had come there to kill, not to steal. Investigators turned their attention to Sadie's digital life. Her emails, text messages, and social media accounts were reviewed for anything suspicious. They found no threats, no troubling messages, no signs of fear in her final days. Her last texts were cheerful, making plans with friends and coordinating work tasks. It was as though she had no idea she was in danger. Detectives interviewed her neighbors, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. Most said no, though one elderly neighbor mentioned seeing a car parked oddly near Sadie's driveway the night before she was discovered. Unfortunately, they couldn't recall the make, model, or license plate. It was a frustrating lead that went nowhere. What disturbed investigators most was the level of planning. The killer had likely known Sadie's routine. They knew when she'd be alone, and they knew how to get in without raising suspicion. There were no signs of a break-in, suggesting she may have opened the door willingly. Whoever did this may have been someone she knew, or someone who had carefully studied her life from a distance. This wasn't the work of a random attacker. It was methodical, controlled, and deeply personal. The brutality of the killing, paired with the absence of evidence, pointed to something far more terrifying, a murderer who had taken their time, who had prepared, and who had vanished without a trace. As the case unfolded, it became clear that Sadie Hartley had been marked for death long before the killer ever crossed her threshold. As investigators dug deeper into Sadie Hartley's life, they focused on the people closest to her. Friends and family were interviewed extensively, and one name kept surfacing: Mark Penrose. He had been dating Sadie for just over a year, and those who knew them described their relationship as serious and affectionate. Mark, however, had not been in town at the time of the murder. He was in Switzerland on a skiing trip with friends, a fact confirmed by travel documents, photographs, and witness statements. With his alibi rock solid, suspicion shifted elsewhere. But Mark's background led investigators down a new path. He had recently ended a long-term relationship with a woman named Emma Thorley. Emma, in her mid-40s, had once worked as a ski instructor and lived an adventurous life. At first glance, she seemed unremarkable, athletic, confident, and articulate. But behind that exterior was a woman who, by all accounts, had struggled to accept that her relationship with Mark was over. The breakup had not been mutual, and she had reportedly been devastated when he moved on with Sadie. Sadie had confided in close friends that she found Emma's presence unsettling. There had been strange incidents in recent months: her car, tires slashed, unsettling prank calls, and even an odd encounter where a woman had stared at her for too long while she shopped in town. Nothing had ever been proven, and Sadie hadn't reported any of it to the police. She hadn't wanted to cause drama or seem paranoid, but now every odd moment suddenly seemed like a warning sign. Police began to look at Emma more closely. What they found was a trail of subtle but disturbing behavior. She had searched Sadie's name online dozens of times. She had created fake social media profiles to follow her. She had even driven past Sadie's house on multiple occasions. Her obsession wasn't just emotional, it was organized, methodical. But when questioned, Emma claimed she had nothing to do with the murder. She admitted to being upset about Mark, moving on, but insisted she was trying to rebuild her life and had no involvement in Sadie's death. With no physical evidence linking her to the crime, police needed something more concrete. That's when they discovered a critical piece of footage from a discount store's security camera. A week before the murder, a woman strongly resembling Emma was seen purchasing bleach, disposable gloves, cleaning cloths, and duct tape. The footage showed her wearing a hood and avoiding eye contact, but investigators were confident it was her. Even more incriminating was the purchase of a burner phone. When they traced the signal data, they found that the phone had been switched on only a handful of times, each time near Sadie's house. Most damning of all, it had pinged just outside the property on the night of the murder. With this evidence, Police believed they had found their suspect. But as they delved deeper, they realized Emma hadn't acted alone. The web of deceit surrounding Sadie's death was more tangled than anyone had imagined. Someone else had been involved, someone willing to help turn obsession into murder. The discovery of the burner phone and the store footage linking Emma Thorley to suspicious purchases gave detectives a solid direction, but it wasn't enough to close the case. They needed to understand how Emma had managed to carry out such a brutal and carefully planned attack without leaving any definitive trace behind. As they examined her phone records, one name began to appear repeatedly: Joanne Rix. Joanne was an old acquaintance of Emma's, someone she had known from her younger years. Unlike Emma, Joanne had a troubled past. She had a string of petty criminal convictions, including theft, fraud, and drug possession. She had been released from prison just months earlier and was trying to get back on her feet. Investigators quickly learned that Joanne was financially unstable and had recently reconnected with Emma. To detectives, this connection didn't look innocent. They began to suspect that Emma had enlisted Joanne's help in the murder, either as an accomplice or someone she could manipulate into doing her dirty work. Surveillance footage and GPS data placed both women together multiple times in the week leading up to the murder. They were seen filling up petrol, walking through town together, and even sitting in a parked car outside a supermarket late at night. These meetings didn't appear to be social. Something was being planned. Investigators believed that Emma had lured Joanne into her scheme under the pretense of needing a favor, offering money or protection in exchange for silence and support. A search warrant was issued for Joanne's small flat in a nearby town. It didn't take long for police to uncover disturbing evidence. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom was the burner phone. Next to it was a pair of disposable gloves, faintly stained with blood. Forensic testing confirmed what detectives feared. The blood belonged to Sadie Hartley. Faced with this discovery, Joanne was arrested and brought in for questioning. She denied everything. She insisted she had no idea what Emma had been planning and that she had never set foot inside Sadie's house. But as the evidence mounted, her story began to fall apart. Detectives soon realized that Joanne's role may not have been as straightforward as it first seemed. Security footage from the night of the murder showed Emma's car, not Joanne's, near Sadie's house. Phone tower data revealed that Joanne's phone remained in one location all night, nowhere near the crime scene. That's when a shocking theory began to form. Joanne hadn't committed the murder. She had been used. Police believe Emma drugged Joanne on the night of the killing, either slipping something into her drink or giving her sleeping pills, ensuring that Joanne would be unconscious and unaware. Then Emma took Joanne's car, drove to Sadie's home and carried out the murder herself. She returned hours later, cleaned up, and let Joanne believe she had simply helped with logistics. The idea was horrifying. Not only had Emma orchestrated a killing with terrifying precision, but she had done so while carefully setting up someone else to take the blame. It was a level of manipulation that showed a complete lack of remorse and a chilling capacity for evil. The trial of Emma Thorley and Joanne Rix began under intense public scrutiny. News of Sadie Hartley's brutal murder had already sent shockwaves through the nation, but as the details of the case unfolded in court, the true horror of what had happened gripped everyone who watched. This was not a spontaneous act of violence or a crime born from desperation. It was a meticulously planned execution, driven by jealousy, obsession, and a need for control. The prosecution laid out the case in methodical detail. They showed how Emma had stalked Sadie for months, gathering information, monitoring her movements, and carefully crafting a plan to remove her from the picture. Every step had been calculated, buying cleaning supplies, acquiring a burner phone, and using Joanne to deflect suspicion. Emma's obsession with Mark Penrose had consumed her to the point where she could no longer see Sadie as a person. She saw her only as an obstacle that needed to be erased. In court, forensic experts testified about the evidence found at Joanne's flat and the phone records that tied Emma to Sadie's house. Digital analysts reconstructed Emma's online activities, which included dozens of searches for Sadie's address, work schedule, and social media profiles. Surveillance footage showed her stalking the neighborhood in the days leading up to the murder. The sheer volume of planning left little doubt about her intent. But what shocked the courtroom most was the revelation of how Emma had manipulated Joanne. Despite Joanne's criminal history, she had not been the one to kill Sadie. Toxicology reports supported the theory that Joanne had been drugged on the night of the murder. Her blood contained traces of a strong sedative. Witnesses also testified to seeing Joanne looking dazed and confused in the days that followed, unable to remember key events. Emma had silenced her accomplice by rendering her helpless, turning her into an unknowing accessory. When Emma took the stand, she denied everything. She insisted Joanne had acted alone and that she had no knowledge of the crime until after it happened. But her cold demeanor, lack of emotion, and contradictions under cross-examination only deepened the jury's suspicion. Joanne, who eventually agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence, painted a picture of a woman who was manipulative, charismatic, and dangerous. She claimed Emma had promised her money and a fresh start if she helped her, but had never revealed just how far she planned to go. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached their verdict. Emma Thorley was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. The judge called her actions premeditated, remorseless, and driven by pure evil. Joanne Rix was convicted of assisting an offender and sentenced to 12 years in prison. She will likely serve half of that time behind bars. Sadie Hartley's death was mourned by family, friends, and an entire community who struggled to make sense of such cruelty. Her life, marked by kindness and quiet success, had been ended by someone who couldn't bear to see her happy. The case left behind a painful truth, that the most dangerous people are sometimes those who hide behind charm and calm appearances. Emma didn't just kill. She calculated, planned, and destroyed. And in doing so, she earned a place in history as the face of a murder truly born from pure evil.